The restaurant was the kind of place where nothing unexpected ever happened. Crystal glasses always sparkled. Conversations stayed low and controlled. Money sat at every table, wrapped in silk and confidence. Which is why, when a small girl pushed open the heavy glass door, the entire room fell silent, as if someone had cut the power. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her school uniform was wrinkled, damp at the hem, and stained with something that looked far too close to tears. Her shoes made no sound on the polished floor, but every head turned toward her anyway, drawn by something they didn't yet understand. Her hands were clenched around a folded piece of paper. Her knuckles were white with effort, as if she were holding on to the last scrap of courage she had left. The bodyguard near the entrance stepped forward immediately, instinctively positioning himself between the child and the man he served. But the girl didn't even glance at him. She walked straight past a table full of businessmen who suddenly couldn't remember their own names. She drifted by a group of women in diamonds who stared at her with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. And then she stopped in front of the man sitting alone in the corner. Damien Vale didn't need an introduction. Everyone in the city knew who he was, or at least, who they believed him to be. The man who made police officers nervous. The man judges respected a little too quickly. The man whose name, whispered in the wrong alley, could change the temperature of a room. He didn't look up at first. He simply set down his knife with deliberate care. The soft click of metal against porcelain slicing through the silence. Only then did he lift his eyes to meet hers. The girl swallowed hard. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked under the weight of fear. "Can you walk me to school, please?" The bodyguard froze mid-step. The maître d' took a breath, as if he needed to steady himself. Even the couples at nearby tables leaned forward without meaning to. Damien didn't answer her right away. He looked at her, the way he evaluated threats slow. "Precise." Unblinking, his gaze slid to her wrist, where faint bruises formed a bracelet of ugly purple and yellow. The bodyguard took another step, ready to remove her gently. But Damien raised 2 fingers. A silent command. "Stop." Only then did he speak. "What's your name, Mia?" she whispered. "Mia Hampton." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the piece of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a child's crayon, drawing messy lines, crooked colors, and 3 stick figures towering over a smaller one. Their faces were angry scribbles. Off to the side sat a black rectangle on 4 wheels. Her voice quivered as she tried to explain. "They push me every day," she said. "They call me names. They take my backpack. They hurt me." Her breath came quicker now, rushing out as if she were afraid she wouldn't get the chance to finish. "And there's a man in a black car. He waits after school. He knows where I live." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a thin line of dirt across her cheek. "I told my teacher," she said. "She told me I'm being dramatic." Her lip trembled. "I told the principal. He said kids need to solve their own problems." She swallowed again, hard enough to make her small shoulders shake. "My mum called the police. They said mean words aren't a crime." Damien remained still, but something in his expression shifted barely there. A flicker, gone before anyone else could have noticed. Something ancient and wounded stirred in him. A memory he thought he'd buried years ago. Finally, he asked, "Why come to me?" And that was when Mia looked up with eyes too old for a 7-year-old child. "Because everyone is scared of you," she said softly. "And I thought, if they're scared of you, maybe they'll be scared to hurt me." The words landed sharper than any blade. A ripple of discomfort traveled through the restaurant. Not because the girl was wrong, but because she was heartbreakingly, brutally right. Damien leaned back slightly, watching her with a focus that made grown men shake. Her logic was simple, devastating, and pure. She had chosen the monster because the people who claimed to be protectors had failed her. He reached out slowly, giving her time to decide whether to trust him. When he took the drawing from her hand, he did so with unexpected gentleness. He studied the drawing longer than anyone expected him to. Longer than he studied business contracts. Longer than he studied enemies. Because, in those crude lines, he recognized himself a small figure, surrounded by giants, who never listened when he cried. He lowered the paper. "Where's your mother now?" he asked. "At work," Mia said. "She works at the hospital. All night." She tried to help, but no one believes her. Damien exhaled slowly. The kind of breath a man takes right before he makes a decision that cannot be undone. He nodded once to his bodyguard. "Call Marcus," he said. "Tell him to start digging. Within an hour." Information came pouring in. The kids who hurt her, their parents donated tens of thousands to the school every year. A school that protected reputations. Not children. The man in the black car, connected to a local extortion crew targeting women living alone, particularly nurses, waitress, and single moms. The complaints Mia's mother filed, ignored. Marked as low priority. Filed under insufficient evidence. And Elena Hampton, a mother working herself to the bone, had reached out to every system designed to help her. Only to be dismissed. Minimized. Or told she was overreacting. Damien listened to all of it, in silence. But his silence wasn't empty. It was simmering. Controlled. Lethal. His lieutenant finished the report, adding that Elena worked double shifts, slept little, and lived in an apartment barely safe enough for anyone, let alone a child. For a moment, Damien said nothing. His jaw tightened. Then relaxed. Then tightened again. As if he were locking something dangerous inside him. Finally he spoke. "No one protects her," he said quietly. "So I will." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even loud. But it was absolute. With those 5 words, everything shifted. Lines were drawn. Choices were made. The city just didn't know it yet. Later that night, Damien sat in his penthouse office overlooking the river. Mia's crayon drawing lay flat on his desk beneath the warm glow of a lamp. He couldn't stop staring at it. The stick figures were uneven. The colors were messy. But her fear was clear. And so was her bravery. She had walked into the lion's den with nothing but a drawing and hope. And he knew exactly what he needed to do next. The next morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, Damien Vale would walk Mia Hampton to school. Not because he was a good man. Not because he wanted redemption. But because the child had looked at him, of all people, and believed he could keep her safe. And for the first time in years, Damien found himself wanting to live up to someone's belief. Morning arrived with the kind of soft gold that made the city look kinder than it really was. Cars lined up along the school driveway. Parents sipping coffee and rushing their children along. Unaware that the entire routine was about to change. No one noticed the black luxury sedan at first. Not until it pulled into the bus lane, the place no one was allowed to stop. The driver's door opened first, followed by the unmistakable figure of Damien Vale. He stepped out with calm confidence. His expression unreadable. Conversations faltered. Parents stared. Teachers froze mid-motion. People who had never met him somehow still recognized him, the man you weren't supposed to cross. The man whose name traveled through the city like a warning. Then the back door opened. Little Mia climbed out. Her backpack too big for her shoulders. Her fingers already reaching for his hand. He took it without hesitation, adjusting his long stride to match the rhythm of her small steps. If fear had been a fog around her before, it vanished now, because she wasn't walking alone. She was walking beside someone the world feared. A group of boys near the playground noticed her first. Their ringleader, a tall 8-year-old with a smirk too cruel for his age, started toward her with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told no. But when he saw Damien, the color drained from his face. The smirk collapsed. He stumbled backward, bumping into his own friends, who suddenly found a deep fascination with the pavement. The crowd had parted around them without being asked, leaving a clear path straight to the school entrance. Teachers who had once brushed off Mia's bruises now stepped back like shadows shrinking from fire. One woman, clutching a clipboard, tried to smile. The smile died as soon as Damien glanced her way. The principal arrived next, puffed up with authority he hadn't earned. His greeting was cheerful, polished, practiced the same tone he likely used to charm wealthy donors and soften angry parents. "Good morning. Itcha, welcome to Save It," Damien said, his voice low but carrying easily through the air. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick, overstuffed file. The principal's smile weakened as he accepted it with shaking hands. Inside were photographs of bruises, recordings of ignored reports, email chains of Elena begging for help, documentation of every time the school had chosen convenience over responsibility, evidence of a pattern they tried to bury, and behind those pages, tucked neatly at the bottom, was a check, a large, unmistakable donation, earmarked specifically for safety protocols and anti-bullying measures. Damien didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Fix it," he said quietly. "All of it." The principal nodded so fast it looked painful. Someone whispered, "Who is that man?" Someone else answered, "The kind you hope never remembers your name." Mia squeezed his hand, looking up at him with something close to awe. He didn't smile, but he did nod, a small gesture of reassurance. When he finally walked her into the building, the hallway went silent all over again. Teachers avoided his eyes. Older students stepped aside. He left her at her classroom door, crouching down to her height. "You're safe," he said simply, and for the first time in weeks, Mia believed it. That evening, while the city lights began to flicker alive, a woman approached Damien's restaurant with hesitant steps and a knot of nerves twisting in her stomach. Elena Hampton stood at the entrance in faded scrubs, her exhaustion visible in the way she carried herself, shoulders tight, hands wrung together, eyes searching for courage. She looked completely out of place, inside the elegant space filled with polished floors and soft music. The maitre d' tried to redirect her, assuming she didn't belong, but when she said Damien's name, everything changed. A moment later, Damien appeared from the back hallway, stopping when he saw her, a tired mother who had run out of options long before her daughter walked into his life. Elena took a breath and lifted her chin, refusing to shrink in front of him. "I'm not here for money," she said quickly. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I needed to thank you." Damien didn't react right away. It was as if gratitude was foreign to him, something he hadn't heard in a long time. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I did," she answered softly. "Because, whatever you did today, my daughter came home smiling. Smiling. She hasn't done that in a month." Her voice cracked on the last word. She forced it back under control. "I don't want charity. And I won't let anyone own us. I just wanted you to know how much it meant." She expected arrogance, or coldness, or indifference. But Damien surprised her. "A child asked me for help," he said quietly. "I don't ignore courage like that." For the first time, Elena saw something different in him. The fatigue around his eyes, the tension he carried like armor, the loneliness coiled so tightly behind his ribs, he didn't even notice it anymore. He wasn't just a dangerous man. He was a haunted one. Something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. Two wounded people, recognizing old scars in each other. The next week unfolded like a quiet war only one side knew they were fighting. And Damien fought it with a precision that made prosecutors whisper. Anonymously. He delivered the entire file of school negligence to the district attorney. Surveillance footage of the black car stalking Mia appeared on a detective's desk. Bank statements tracing the extortion ring to a local gang arrived in the inbox of a federal agent. Within days, arrests followed. 3 men were pulled off the street in handcuffs. Another cut a deal and gave up his superiors. The black sedan disappeared from the neighborhood and didn't return. The father of the boy who led the bullying found himself under sudden pressure, not threats. Not violence. But the kind of pressure wealthy men hated: financial scrutiny, legal complications, and a very strong suggestion from the school board that he resign. Teachers who ignored Mia's pleas were reassigned pending review. A few were quietly removed altogether. Justice didn't roar. It whispered, but it whispered from powerful places. And everyone knew who had made those whispers possible. At home, Elena and Mia felt the ripples of that war without ever seeing the battlefield. Mia began sleeping through the night again. She ate breakfast without tears. She walked to school without scanning every passing car in fear. Her shoulders slowly lifted from where they had been permanently hunched. Elena noticed changes too. Her overbearing supervisor suddenly approved her shift request. Her manager began checking on her more kindly. A coworker mentioned, offhandedly, that someone from higher up had called about her employment record. No one said Damien's name. No one had to. Elena lay awake at night, wondering who he really was. A monster, a guardian, something in between, she didn't know. But she did know this: no one had listened before. No one had cared. But he did. He cared enough to burn half the city down to make sure a little girl felt safe again. And yet, even as justice unfolded like a storm on her behalf, Damien himself remained distant, a presence felt, more than seen. A shadow that intervened without demanding anything in return. Elena didn't realize it yet, but the final act would reveal the truth about the man Mia trusted. Peace didn't arrive with fanfare. It came quietly, like dawn sneaking over a horizon. Soft and steady, and almost fragile at first. For Mia, it arrived as laughter, a real one. The kind that lifted from her chest, instead of being trapped behind fear. She sat in the school cafeteria between 2 classmates who had started joining her at lunch. Shyly at first, then with growing warmth. Their tiny table, once a place of exile, now held juice boxes, crayons, and jokes only 7-year-olds found funny. Her bruises faded, turning from angry purples to faint yellow smudges and then disappearing altogether. She no longer flinched when someone walked too close. She no longer searched for the black sedan. She no longer held her breath when stepping through classroom doors. And for the first time in months, her mother breathed normally too long. Steady breaths instead of the short, panicked ones she'd learned to live on. The exhaustion in Elena's eyes didn't evaporate, but it softened. Hope began replacing fear. Dreams she had packed away in boxes reopened, letting in light again. But there was someone else paying attention to this transformation. Every morning, long before the school bell rang, a dark car sat parked a block away. Not close enough to be seen easily. Not far enough to feel disconnected. Just close enough that if something went wrong, he could be there in moments. Damien Vale didn't step out. He didn't call attention to himself. He didn't interfere. He simply watched. Watched the girl who had shattered his armor with a crayon drawing. Watched her walk through the school gates without shrinking. Watched her confidence return piece by piece, as if she were gathering scattered fragments of herself. His lieutenant sat beside him, on most mornings, quietly observing. After nearly 2 weeks, Marcus finally broke the silence. "You know," he said lightly, "we've taken down half a street crew, forced a school district to rebuild itself. and made sure every authority within 10 miles is terrified of failing that kid again. Damien didn't respond. Marcus leaned back in the seat, studying him. So why do you keep coming here? The question lingered in the cabin, suspended in the air like smoke. Damien didn't answer, not because he wanted to keep secrets, but because he couldn't put it into words. How could he explain that this child, this small girl, who had walked into his world, trembling and desperate, had awakened something he thought he'd buried years ago? How could he admit that her trust, undeserved, unrequested, had cracked open places inside him he'd long sealed shut? He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on Mia as she skipped toward the school entrance, ponytail bouncing with each step. He didn't say, "Because she reminds me of myself." He didn't say, "Because I wish someone had shown up for me." He didn't say, "Because protecting her feels like protecting the child I used to be." But that was the truth. Raw, painful, and honest. That same morning, as he prepared to pull away, something unexpected happened. Mia paused at the school gate, as she always did. But instead of racing inside, she turned around, slowly, purposefully. Her eyes scanned the street, unaware of the world watching her. And somehow, impossibly, she found him. Her face lit up with recognition, gratitude, relief, trust. And then, with the pure simplicity only a child could manage, she raised her small hand and waved. Just one wave. Soft, warm, full of everything she couldn't put into words. Damien's breath caught, not visibly, not dramatically, just enough that his fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Then he lifted 2 fingers in return. A gesture so small, it could have been mistaken for nothing. But between them, across that distance, across their shared history, it was enormous. 3 seconds passed. 3 seconds that held the entire journey from terror to safety. From silence to belief. From fear to hope. Then she turned and vanished through the school doors. Damien watched until she was completely gone. Only then did he let the car roll forward. That evening, Elena Hampton made her way to his restaurant again. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't desperate. She simply wanted to see him, the man who had changed her daughter's life. But when she walked inside, Damien wasn't there. His usual table sat empty, perfectly arranged. A folded napkin resting, untouched, beside an untouched glass. On the table lay a small cream envelope with her name written in handwriting far more elegant than she expected. Her heart hammered as she opened it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace sized for a child. A tiny star pendant designed to rest lightly against Mia's collarbone. It sparkled under the restaurant's warm lighting. Fragile, but unmistakably precious. Beneath it sat a note, written in the same, careful, precise hand. Now, the world believes her. That's all that mattered. Elena read the words once, then again, then a third time. Slower. A faint tremble moved through her. The kind that comes when emotion hits too deep to contain. She whispered into the quiet room. More to herself than to anyone else. He saved us. Not for power, but because he remembers what it feels like to be small. The realization settled around her like a soft blanket. He hadn't done any of this for gratitude. He hadn't done it to earn her favor. He hadn't done it to polish his reputation. He had done it because he understood. Because somewhere inside that hardened exterior lived a boy who had once needed someone too and never had them. The night air was cool as she walked home. City lights flickering through the dusk like constellations. Cars hummed softly. A couple laughed on a nearby corner. Life moved on around her. Ordinary and profound. When she reached her apartment, she found Mia already asleep. Not restless. Not whimpering. Not gripping her blankets in fear. Just sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. The nightmares were gone. Elena stood at the doorway, hand pressed to her heart, letting the relief wash over her. She touched the necklace gently before placing it on Mia's dresser for morning. Somewhere across the city, Damien Vale sat alone in a room far too big for one person. He leaned back in his chair, letting the quiet settle around him. And on his face, just barely, just for a moment, there was something that almost resembled peace. Not redemption, not salvation, just a small, private acceptance that he had done something good, something that wouldn't haunt him, something that mattered. He hadn't been redeemed by love. Not yet. But he had been changed by kindness, the kind he chose to give when no one else would. And in that choice, something inside him shifted. Not enough to fix everything. Not enough to soften the darkness entirely. But enough to remind him he was still human. Enough to start something new. Quietly. Slowly. Softly. Like a star warming through the clouds. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it touched you, if it made you feel something, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves stories with heart and depth. And I'd love to hear from you. 2. Comment below, tell me where you're watching from, and what part of this story stayed with you the most. Your support means the world. It helps this channel grow, and it helps me bring you more stories, just like this one.